Good.
All right. I call to order this regular meeting for the Governing Board, Piscataway Unified School District. It is Tuesday, May 19th, 2020, and the time is 5:11 p.m. Thank you for your patience. We've had some technical difficulty. I will have a roll call starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Here.
Patty Beckman.
Present.
And Allison Beckham. We have 3 governing board members present, and we have a quorum. Board members Kravitz and Perlberg will be joining us shortly. Vice President Beckman, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? All other participants, please turn off your microphones.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We have an action item on the agenda for the first item. The board may vote to modify board policy BEDB, board agenda, to call for all public comment on all board agenda items at one time. The modification will be in effect for all virtual regular board meetings going forward. Public comment will be taken during the meeting via telephone calls to 480-484-7873. Do I have any discussion from board members? Okay.
Well, just really quickly, just to be clear, this is for just the period in which we're doing the virtual meetings, right?
Yes, I will. Also, Debbie, I'll let you know I'm getting a text from Sandy that she can't get into Teams, just so that you know. Yes, I'll clarify it. I wrote something up just so that we could be clear what we're doing. Due to the public meetings being suspended and individuals being unable to make an in-person public comment is currently accepted on the telephone only. The modification, if we so wish, calls for one public comment session to take place after the superintendent comments. This will enable our constituents to call in and be placed in a queue for an opportunity to speak online. When you call in at 480-484-SUSD or 7873, you will need to give your first and last name, and you will be put on hold until you speak. You will have a 3-minute time limit when speaking, and the public comment etiquette still applies. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes, it's great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just make a motion to amend this policy during the virtual meetings only. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board member Greenberg seconds. We'll have an individual vote starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
And Allison Beckham. Motion passes 3-0. So if you're interested in making a public comment, please call in now to get your place in line. Once the superintendent's comments are over and the public comment session begins, no other callers will be accepted. The number once again is 480-484-SUSD, which is 484-7873. Do I have any changes to the agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion?
President Beckman, I'm sorry. Because of the action that was just taken, then actually items 7, 10, and 12 should be eliminated from the agenda, which are the other calls to public.
Okay, thank you. All right, so how about I move to accept the agenda as amended, in which we would remove, you said 7, 10, and 12?
Correct.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Beckman seconds. We'll have an individual vote, starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
And Allison Beckham, aye. Motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to students and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Creekard, would you please present?
Thank you, President Beckman, members of the board. This evening, before I get to today's celebration of students, I would like to mention a couple of district items of business. Last week, we launched a 2-week survey to gather feedback from families, students, and staff members about the success and challenges of the online learning instructional model we have had in place since we returned from spring break. The Hanover survey is open until a week from Thursday, May 28th, a day longer than had been publicized. The results we receive will help guide the district as we make decisions going forward for next school year and beyond. The survey takes about 10 minutes. You can find the link on the homepage of the SUSD website, which is susd.org. Nutrition Services program for feeding children in the community has gone through another evolution in the past week. Instead of providing families with 5 free breakfasts and lunches for children ages 1 to 18 per week, new rules permit 7 breakfasts and lunches to be handed out at a time per child. So with school being out for the summer, starting Friday, all 7 days of the week are covered. Also, the weekly student meal program will continue through June 24th. Nutrition Services has distributed more than 130,000 meals since it began its curbside service the week of March 16th. As you well know, these past 10 weeks have been challenging and extremely difficult for all of us, not just in Scottsdale and Arizona, but around the United States and in just about every corner of the world, as we have, separately and together, faced the issues surrounding the coronavirus pandemic. We've had to learn about issues that just 6 months ago, when we were sitting down to have Thanksgiving dinner with our families and not being 6 feet apart, we never ever imagined that we would be that would nearly be the sole focus of our lives, much less thrust critical decision making on us in the Scottsdale Unified School District. We have taken crash courses on social distancing, self-quarantining, distance learning, and so much more. We've had to make the best choices for our students, their families, and our staff out of some of the worst options. But as we wind down this 2019-2020 school year, one that none of us will probably ever forget as much as we would like to, I am so proud to be this district superintendent. I marvel at the way SUSD came together to continue our mission of educating our nearly 23,000 students. I can say without hesitation that the employees of every single district department and of every single school have put forth extraordinary efforts during these past 9 weeks, clearing hurdles left and right to not only make the best out of a nearly impossible situation, but to actually excel in doing it. I want to say a special thank you to all of them. I've also been so impressed with the depth of feeling, intellect, and character of the people who lead this school district and the careful, mindful way in which they have helped SUSD make the decisions that it has had to make since mid-March. There are still many more choices to be made, and I am confident that they will continue to be the right ones for students, families, staff, and SUSD. And through it all, I've also been pleasantly surprised and actually amazed by the way our students, particularly our senior class, have handled these unprecedented times and adapted to online learning. They have been serious, practical, and positive, and have taken on a lot, successfully so. I learn from them every day and know our future is in good hands. As it closes out its high school days and submits its last assignments online, I want to take a moment to talk about the class of 2020. Our seniors have lost so much of the tradition surrounding what it means to graduate from high school. Major events, far away from classmates and favorite teachers when they should be together. Events such as prom, the last chance to put on a uniform to represent their school, the last time tuning instruments before end of the year concert performances, the last art show, senior ditch day, senior pranks, yes, we know you do them, all concluding with that walk onto the football field to collect that slip of paper that says they are ready for the next chapter of their lives. This year, commencement exercises will take place virtually, starting in about an hour, in fact, when Scottsdale Online Learning's graduating class of 26 students gathers with families, friends, and each other on Zoom. Graduation for our 5 campus-based schools will be appearing online at varying times 2 nights from now, Thursday evening. I want to take this opportunity to wish our 1,900 strong class of 2020, Scottsdale Online, Arcadia Titans, Chaparral Firebirds, Coronado Dons, Desert Mountain Wolves, and Saguaro Sabercats, the very best, and to thank our seniors for their perseverance, resilience, and enthusiasm as they navigated through the last quarter of their high school careers. Congratulations, graduates. We look forward to hearing of all the many great things we know you will accomplish in the future. Now, we have some student and staff celebrations to share with you this afternoon. Pandemic or not, the honors continue to accumulate. Ordinarily, we would have invited these honorees to our meeting at Coronado High School, but that was not to be again this month. Rather, it is my pleasure to tell you about them. You may have read recently that 37 of our seniors were among the first in the state to receive the Arizona Department of Education's new State Seal of Arts Proficiency. These excelling artists in band, theater, visual art, film, choir, dance, and orchestra have shown a passion for the art of their choice, and in some cases more than one, and are examples of what it means to commit to it. The ADE also issues state seals of biliteracy that are affixed to diplomas and reflected on students' transcripts. Recipients of the biliteracy seal must successfully complete all English language arts graduation requirements and demonstrate proficiency in a second language. We found out just yesterday that 165 SUSD seniors will earn state biliteracy seals for their proficiency in Spanish, French, Chinese, and Japanese. That's an increase of 42% from last year. The National Merit Scholarship Foundation has made 2 of its annual 4 announcements of scholarship recipients. Congratulations to Sophia Zhang from Desert Mountain High School and Talia Frindell from Chaparral High School. The annual ASU Gammage High School Musical Theater Awards program will take place online this coming Saturday evening. Congratulations to the productions of Sweeney Todd at Chaparral, Little Shop of Horrors at Desert Mountain, and Footloose at Saguaro, and their respective theater teachers, Ed Como, Marilyn Mumaw, and Tim McCandless, for the multiple semifinalists and finalist nominations garnered by their students in acting, singing, and dance, in technical recognition for set design, lighting, sound, costumes, hair and makeup, and stage management. Turning to athletics, I am pleased to announce that SUSD Athletic Director Nathan Slater has been elected to head up the Arizona Interscholastic Association's 5A High School Athletic Conference for the next 3 years. He will be succeeded on the 6-school panel that represents 5A's Northeast region by Desert Mountain High School Athletic Director Steven Cervantes. I would just like to add parenthetically that this is just the second time an SUSD employee has had the honor of chairing an AIA conference. It was a few years ago by some guy named Creekard. Sticking with athletics, the AIA recently named former SUSD Athletic Director Joe Court to its Athletic Administrators Hall of Fame. This honor is reserved for those who have served the cause of Arizona high school athletics in an exemplary manner for a very long time. Congratulations, my friend. It is SUSD tradition to recognize members of this year's graduating class who have received appointments to U.S. military academies at this last governing board meeting that school is in session. We wish we were able to introduce them to you in person. The nation's 6 U.S. military academies accept only young men and women of the highest character and achievements into their corps. Our class of 2020 recruits exemplify that and more. These students leave SUSD with excellent records of achievement in the classroom, continuing to challenge themselves even in their senior year with multiple honors and advanced placement courses. These students have been leaders in the school communities and on school athletic teams, proudly representing them and SUSD on basketball and volleyball courts, soccer fields, and baseball fields. They are outstanding contributors to their school communities and are respected by not only their classmates, but also by their teachers, coaches, and school administrators. They represent the very best of SUSD. Let me tell you just a little bit about each of them. Sydney Davis has played club soccer since she was 6, playing on elite local and regional teams, and is currently part of a national developmental league. With a weighted GPA of 4.94, Sydney is as serious about her academics as her soccer, successfully completing 5 advanced placement courses and receiving an AP Scholar Distinction Award. She has made significant contributions to Chaparral's Science Olympiad team, helping lead the school to a 3rd-place state finish last year. Sydney cares about the success of her classmates, as evidenced by her leadership role in Chaparral's math and science student tutoring program, and through the Spanish Honor Society, through which she introduced the school to the Pulsera project that helps support women in Central America with their crafts. Sydney will head to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs to play soccer for the Falcons. Sydney will be joined there by fellow Firebird Madison Felker, who will use her significant academic and athletic skills to be a successful Air Force recruit. Madison was a varsity team captain for the Chaparral volleyball team this past season and is a 4-year varsity player. She also captains her club volleyball team. She was named All-Region Player of the Year for the 6A Desert Valley region, won the team's MVP award, and was named an All-District Athlete for the 2019 season, leading the region in digs and 3rd in the state for digs in the 6A conference. Madison also thrived on the challenge of multiple honors and AP classes. She is also deeply involved in community organizations such as the Veterans Heritage Project Club, Backpack for Humanity Club, and Feed My Starving Children, speaking to her depth of compassion for people that will bring her success in the Air Force. Jake Murphy will join his brother Carter, whom we celebrated just a year ago on the basketball courts of the Air Force Academy. Jake attended Hopi Elementary School through 4th grade and has spent his high school career at Arcadia High School. Jake is an exceptional young man who is strong in his convictions and knows who he is. His counselor and social studies teacher tell us. He is hardworking and pays close attention to the details so that he always turns in his best work, whether it's in the classroom or on the basketball court. He is kind and respectful to both faculty and peers. They believe, and we have to agree, that Jake is destined to do great things. Joshua Richards has played soccer for Saguaro High School for the past 4 years, serving as its captain this past season. Joshua and his family emigrated to the U.S. from South Africa. That worldly perspective shapes him in everything he does, whether it's inspiring his teammates on the soccer field, being a lifeguard at city swimming pools, taking the time to listen to people, or enrolling in the rigorous curriculum of the Math and Science Academy, from which he will graduate this week with distinction. Josh plans to study biology while he plays soccer at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Joel Rubin transferred to Saguaro in his sophomore year. The impact he has had while a SaberCat cannot be understated, as we have learned from his baseball coach, Joe Mickey, who tells us Joel is dedicated to being the best person he can be, inspiring those around him with his energy, ability, and competitive leadership. He volunteers for the Miracle League of Arizona baseball program for athletes with disabilities, and is exactly the type of person one would want representing your institution and your country. Joel is headed to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point where he will play baseball for the Black Knights. Military Academy appointments come with an all expenses paid college education. In return, by accepting these appointments, these members of SUSD's class of 2020 commit to the stipulation that they serve in their respective service branch for 5 years. Sydney, Madison, Jake, and Joel, each of you will receive an SUSD Challenge coin in celebration of your accomplishments. This is a military tradition, and I hope that this is the one of many challenge coins that you receive in your career. You can look forward to your coin in the mail in the coming days. Thank you for everything you have achieved and the many wonderful things that lie ahead. President Beckham and members of the governing board, please join me in congratulating this group of fine young women and men. We are excited for their future and know success will find them. Thank you.
Oh, gosh, wow. The governing board joins you, Dr. Kriegard, in congratulating all the student leaders that you highlighted tonight. That's fantastic. We wish you the best of luck, and we know that you will continue to lead Scottsdale and the United States. Thank you. We will move on to superintendent comments. So, Dr. Kriegard, your comments?
Oh, no, thank you. That was really combined.
Oh, okay.
Unless you want me to read it again.
Well, I actually was wondering if the beginning was a little bit of your comments, but I didn't have it down that way, so I didn't know. So
No, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, then we will be moving on to the public comment. So I hope that everybody was able that wanted to get a phone call in, and I will put it over to our IT department to see if we had some public comments and if there's anybody on hold.
No people have called in for public comments.
Okay, thank you so much. We will then move on to information and discussion items. Discussion item A, discussion on Hohokam Elementary School update. Dr. Kriegard, do you have any comments? And would you please introduce our presenter?
Thank you, President Beckham.
I'm sorry, Dr. Kriegard.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that Board Member Kravitz joined us at 5:19 p.m. and Board Member Perlberg joined us at 5:27 p.m. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And I was just going to remind you of that as well. We're on the same page. Thank you. The first information item tonight is the Hohokam Elementary School modernization update. And I would like to introduce Mr. Gadd, who will introduce Mr. Rayler for his brief update on Hohokam. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kriegard, Madam President, members of the board. Dennis Rayler, Director of Buildings Services, will present to you Hohokam Elementary Modernization Update. And we will be following this with a subsequent board meeting in June with approval of a GMP. So with that, Dennis, it's all yours.
Good evening, President Beckham, members of the board, Dr. Kriegard. Feels like a little hot potato from Dr. Kriegard to Jeff to me, and I'm going to send it straight on over to SPS Plus. They've got the presentation that could probably take a lot longer, but in light of the heavy board agenda today, we're going to give you a pretty good taste and then offer the opportunity to meet with you in advance of the GMP meeting. So I'd like to introduce the folks from SPS Plus, Darlene Cadman and Mr. Neil Perrett.
Good evening to the board, President Beckham, and also to Dr. Kriegard. And thank you, Dennis, for introducing me. I know that Neil is on the line as well from SPS Plus, and he's going to stay quiet while I do a quick presentation to you guys. I have both slides and a video, and I just have to switch between the two during the process. So bear with me. If you have any questions along the way, definitely interrupt me. I'm going to share my laptop. I hope that's okay with the IT people there. I'm about to do so. There we go. You can just confirm that you have a visual on my laptop.
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me back to talk about Hohokam Elementary. I can say that it's been an absolute pleasure working with Dennis and Principal Rantala and the design team. They've been very helpful and very ready, willing, and able to help me out any way along the process. It's been amazing. So our design update today, I'm just wanting to talk about where we've come from. Quick reminder that we have had several community outreach sessions. We had done a facility assessment on the current building and all the buildings that are there. We went through several iterations of visioning and recommendations to bring the design and documentation to you guys. And I believe we showed you documentation a little while ago. I can't remember the exact date, but at a board meeting a while ago, and I'm excited to show you where we are today. Remembering that we went through the community process and community engagement process, and one of the very important pieces of this was to maintain the Haver character and feel. Things like the breeze block, the overhangs, and the beautiful courtyards, which are really part of the heart of the school. This being the original site plan and what it looked like and what it still looks like on Google Earth if you check, showing 8 schoolhouses with center buildings and a music building on the outside. And this is a view of where we are today. So the design that you last saw was very much like this. We've just developed it a little farther. And essentially where we are today and how we got here is by eliminating the music building, this building here, building A, building E, and then the 2 down the middle. We actually kept 6 of the original Haver schoolhouses, and we created 2 new buildings in the center at the heart of the school to really create this tight-knit campus. The 2 new buildings are here. We call them J and K at the moment. It consists of administration and media center, and also of the PE and music and the cafeteria spaces. This gives you a sneak peek of sort of the site plan and the floor plan. And on this, you can see that these 6 buildings, the original Hohokam schoolhouses, are still retained. And we have these 2 new buildings here. Within that, there's some interesting things I'd like to point out. One, that the memorial garden we've located out here at the front next to the community and bus or parent drop-off lane. And the memorial garden shows in it has in it all of the plaques and other memorials that are scattered throughout the site right now on Hohokam. As some of the trees were being demolished and some of the area around the buildings was being demolished, we've retained all of the plaques that were present, and we've relocated them here, which is accessible to the public, so anyone can come sit on a bench and see those existing memorials. We have also located all of the playgrounds in close proximity all the way around all the schoolhouses. But most importantly, we've maintained these 2 center courtyards, which are really the heart of the school. And we've focused on this little area in here, which we've created a small amphitheater space with a platform and presentation, and really connected the media space library with the platform area in the center here. And we're going to see more pictures of that as we move through. Ultimately, this is the elevation where we have maintained the Haver buildings on either side and incorporated our new buildings down the center. Of note is that the new buildings, we've kept them as low as we could possibly keep them so that they didn't dwarf the existing Haver buildings. Are very small. We've also used materials that mimic or harken back to the characteristics of the Haver by incorporating elements like this wood piece here. Another item of note is that the slope of this roof and the proportion of this structural element, which carries through both buildings, is based on half of the width of each of the Havers. So these Haver schoolhouses have actually informed the design of this entry. And as well, the window banding mimics the havers. So we've used those characters and qualities to inform the design of this piece. This is a small image of the memorial garden showing the plaques and how we've relocated them out to the front of the building so that the community and public can visit and have access to these. This is the amphitheater space in the center. So on this side, I'm assuming you can see my cursor. Okay, I saw some nods, perfect, I forgot. So on this side, we have the media center building, and on this side, we have the platform, music, and PE building. And these two are linked by this common element that goes through both buildings, creating shade for that centerpiece, and also creating a small amphitheater where people can sit and view the platform, and they can engage in outdoor classroom activities, but all the time linking both of these courtyards together, creating that true heart and center of this school. This is a view from the south looking at the new cafeteria PE building. Again, we've got the same elements here, the wood paneling, this structure and slope mimicking the Haver buildings. And you can see that we've created an inviting entry in on this side of the school as well. Quickly, this is just a small blow up of the administration up above, the media center here on the new building. And so you can see we have a nice secure lobby, all the administration functions moving back to the media center here. This view shows the entry and that secure entry where we have now created a new secure entry for visitors to come in. They can speak to the reception people here and are still not able to pass through into the school unless needed, and keeps a nice, warm, and inviting entry. I would like to mention, though, also that this sign and how it is represented in the rendering is actually the original Hohokam Elementary School sign, which we relocated inside the building from the outside of the building. This is a view of the new media center. Of note in this space was that the existing media center had a significant library of reading materials and is actually part of their pride and joy. We wanted to ensure that we had enough library shelving to accommodate all of that, as well as create student areas for reading and contemplation. And also on this side over here, we have area for students to collaborate and work. This wall is actually going to be constructed from existing beams from the current cafeteria, which we have salvaged and will be reusing in this area here as a piece of the old in the new. Here's another view of that small reading nook within the media center. And then a larger view of the student common sort of work area and project space here. It accommodates at least 2 classrooms of students. Let's see here. This is the schoolhouse, and the schoolhouse here shows our classrooms, our offices, small collaboration area and large collaboration area. What is important on the schoolhouses, which we've seen along the way, is that they went from externally focused to internal focused and have now created interior spaces that then open up onto the courtyard. Here we have the collaboration space within the schoolhouse, showing the student work area. Oh, went a little fast there. Facing back into the courtyard, so showing that connectivity to the heart of the campus. If I'm going too fast, somebody just put their hand up. I'm just trying to keep on time. Inside of a classroom. Again, we've kept the strip windows that were part of the character and quality of the school. And then here showing the restroom area with the open wash stations to allow for students to come and go easily within that space. Quick view of the bottom half of the site showing Building K. which has in it, sorry, I probably went a little fast on that. This is the PE spaces, cafeteria and kitchen. So we can see here the PE spaces with a small platform that opens up into that space. And then the cafeteria space, a new space for the school to, that opens up into the PE area so that they can have one larger space. Now I'm just going to show you a quick video because I have some time left. It's approximately 2 minutes long. I'm assuming everyone can still see that. I've shared my screen correctly. Excellent. And I hope you can hear the music, but we will see.
We cannot hear the sound.
Okay, well, I probably can't fix it at this point. I apologize.
It's okay.
This is the amphitheater space in the center here. Looking
Dennis could sing.
I could hum, but I can't carry a tune in.
You do not want to hear me sing.
A view inside the media center. Inside the schoolhouse, collaboration space, smaller collaboration rooms. You should hear the music, it's awesome. This is looking down towards the south end of the site, towards the PE cafeteria entry. And then just coming back up towards the front. And if you are looking carefully, you'll see a kid giving us a peace sign on the way out. And then just changing to nightfall. And there we go.
That's fantastic, Darlene. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I only had 2 little pieces of information left. One, that demolition has already started to occur on the site with roofs being peeled off, and this is the cafeteria building started to be worked on. And that the next steps are that we're in, that Chase is working on bidding and cost finalization right now. GMP is coming to the next meeting, and permit review is underway. And I'll leave it to you guys to ask questions. I also have Neil on the line who will ask questions as well.
Okay, great. Do any of the board members have questions? Yes, Patty Beckman.
Thank you. First of all, Darlene and SPS Plus, I can't.
Patty,
I'm
you're
overwhelmed with how great this looks. And can you hear me?
well, you're going in and out a little bit.
Oh, okay. So hopefully you can hear me. I wanted to thank you. I know the community early on said they wanted their voice to be heard with regard to the design, and I feel like you've achieved that. It looks fantastic. We're excited. I've been watching the demo go on and really optimistic to see the final product. Dennis, do you know, what is that capacity? I forgot that HOCOM is going to be built for. Do we know?
So if we use the Gen Ed classroom spaces, we're at 708. But that doesn't include spaces like resource spaces, PE, art, band, music, all of that would take that number well into 800. But right now, if we were just to count the classroom, 700 square feet and above, we're at 708.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? You can just hit your chat button. Okay, I would just reiterate what Patty said. I think that this community especially was very active in their feelings for keeping the look and feel of the neighborhood, keeping that lower classrooms and keeping it as you know, kid size for elementary school. Also just loved incorporating so much of the existing materials into the new structure. I'm just hearing everybody is very pleased. And aesthetically, it just looks beautiful. I mean, look at that picture that is up right now. So Darlene and Neil, thank you. All of the SPS team that collaborated and worked on this with Dennis and his team. Thank you very much. Dennis, do you have anything else you would like to add?
Just a second offer that if obviously this is a big spend and a big commitment to the district, we'll find out that information here in the coming weeks. But if you did want to come back and review this more thoroughly in our typical 2x2 format, we can certainly do that to make sure that you have every level of comfort that we're doing the right thing.
I know I would, so I look forward to that. I guess you'll probably be emailing us, so that will be fantastic.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We will move on to information item B, first read of proposed revisions to policy JL. Dr. Creekard, do you have any comments? And would you introduce our presenter?
Yes, thank you. Again, this is the first read. The wellness policy has been a topic of discussion in cabinet and with President Beckham and myself. And so we're really bringing this as it is intended to be one of two reads, so that on the first read, we get information from you of changes you'd like to see or things you'd like to continue. And so with that, Ms. Marshall is going to lead that discussion as she does for all policy reviews. So Michelle Marshall.
Thank you, Dr. Creekard. Madam President, members of the board, I'm going to share my screen with you here. Can you all see that policy? Okay. Sorry, I'm getting a...
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the proposed revisions to policy JL student wellness are in general to achieve a few things. One is to update it to align with current statute. Also to incorporate some requests from administration for changes, to align it in general with the ASBA model policy to the extent it didn't conflict with what administration requested. And also, as you'll see, when we get to the regulation and to the next information item on the Wellness Committee, we are recommending referring to the Wellness Committee's work in the form of the guidelines that they developed over the past year, meeting quite a bit to do some great work on those guidelines. So as I'll show you in a bit, we're recommending having a link to those guidelines in the actual regulation so that people can find those easily and go straight to those guidelines. So I'll just start to go through here, and feel free to stop me if you have a question, or we can do questions at the end, whatever your preference. These first are just aligned with ASBA model policy. I believe that this one here, referring to the Secretary of Agriculture, was from our Director of Nutritional Services, Patty Bilbrey. Nutrition, promotion, and marketing. Let me see, I think that was also a request from Ms. Bilbrey, and helps us with the USDA guidelines. And similar for the ones that I'm scrolling to now. Yes.
Oh, I have a quick, it's Sandy. I didn't know whether to do the chat and say,
Sure.
With C, if you could just scroll up again.
Yes.
Okay, hold.
There you go.
Sorry. So we at the paragraph that reads, the district will promote healthy food and beverage. It's on the, I think it's on the top of the second page.
There you go.
It ends with at least. And then there's a bullet point that starts implementing at least. So can we take out the first at least? This promotion will occur through then bullet point.
Oh, yes.
Because that's
certainly do that. You're right, that's repetitive. Let me see if I've got, I want to make sure that I note that change. Okay. I just want to show what we're changing during the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Oh, thank you. That's more.
Okay.
Okay, then a D, I have a
yes.
question about D. That just seems, is that something from the federal government that we have to have in there? Because it seems a bit redundant with, I mean, C, they seem to be quite similar and repetitive.
Yeah, so I'm going to call on Patty Bilbrey, who I know is listening in. I do believe it is from the USDA guidelines, but she knows these way better than I do. So I'm going to ask Patty to chime in.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Kravitz. The bullet points that you see, all of A, B, C, D, E, and F, are requirements under the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act to be tenants within your actual board policy.
Okay.
So we, in those very specific headers, we haven't titled those. Those came from the USDA. It is required to be there, and we are audited on those to make sure that they are in our policy. And then we have to provide our goals of what the overarching goal is. And then in our guidelines, we will put in the guidelines how we intend on reaching those goals. Okay. So they are, so to answer your question, long answer for yes, they are required.
So if I have an issue, I need to speak to, is it Sunny Purdue that's head of USDA?
That's right, you do right, and feed kids, that's Sunny.
Okay. Wow, I'm impressed you know who that is.
Okay.
Okay, so scrolling down, physical activity recess. That definition of recess is from state statute, ARS 15118, and also was recommended update from ASBA. And this language here that I'm scrolling to is also from the statute. It used to be required that we had 2 recess periods, at least 2 for grades 1 through 3. It is now grades 1 through 5. And then those other points 2 through 5 are also required in statute. The next F is about sunscreen, promoting skin health with students and encouraging them to use sunscreen. And it's important also to note that we don't require a note or a prescription from a health professional if parents want to send their kids with sunscreen.
Michelle, I have another question. Okay,
yes.
G. Oh, sorry, am I skipping ahead? I
no,
am sorry.
No, you're good.
So G is another one of those bullet points that have to be in our policy there. I mean, it seems redundant in that, you know, that to me should be at the top of what this whole thing is about, is to create a total school environment conducive to healthy eating and physical activity. And this one doesn't mention anything about mental health either, so, or social emotional learning. So this again is taken from, specifically from federal dictates, I guess.
So this language was already in our policy essentially. Patty, is this also part of the requirements?
It is required, and I will tell you that in our guidelines, this becomes very specific. And we do have our social, emotional, and all types of information such as air quality, what have you, all within our actual guidelines.
Right.
This is just a placeholder in the actual policy, and it requires that you at least address it in your policy. And we go on to further address it in our guidelines, which is probably the appropriate way to do it.
Okay.
But it is required. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, got another one on H too, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, it says here, primary goal will be to. If it's the primary goal, then, and it's something that we should or have to be doing, then can we just change that to the primary goal is?
Absolutely.
Regularly?
Looks good.
Okay.
Okay.
Same thing again for I. Again, we have primary goal. And when we keep saying primary goal, that's primary goal for that particular item, because we keep using primary. So the primary goal of the parent community, I just want to make sure we're not talking about the overall policy, but of that specific bullet point, correct?
That's the way it reads to me. You know, always with these ASBA model language, it's, you know, that's kind of a style choice. It's not.
Okay. Well, let's change that one also, instead of from will be to is as well.
Okay.
And let's see. And instead of a primary goal to engage a wellness committee, or can we, maybe just the district will engage a wellness committee comprised of, instead of.
I don't have an issue with that. Patty, do you see any problem with that?
I'm reading it because the intent here is, as with my discussions with the Department of Ed today, was that we have to state our goals. And I think it still clearly states a goal, just to say the district will engage a wellness committee comprised of family members. I'm fine with it.
I you know, if I'm being too picky, you can say I'm
No,
being
fine with it. I wouldn't say you're being too picky. I knew that part of the guidelines or the compliance is about having goals, so that was the only reason I thought we might keep it in. But tell me again, the district
will engage, and then you can get rid of all that stuff. Instead of a primary goal will be to just the district will engage.
Yeah, I think that still reads as a goal. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So those are all of the changes to proposed to the policy itself. Are there any other comments on that before I show you the regulation?
I have another comment. So
Sure.
This seems to be mostly about nutrition and food and somewhat physical activity, but there's no, so this policy for, you know, specifically doesn't go into anything about guidance counselors. I mean, I know it's in our guidelines, but the policy in and of itself doesn't concern itself with guidance counselors, psychologists, or anything as part of its wellness policy. It's strictly nutritional and physical education, correct?
Yes. The way the policy manual is organized, you know, ASBA called this student wellness. And then in terms of trying to do the compliance with primarily nutrition, and then adding in some of the things, it's not clear to me why they chose to add things like sunscreen here, but not social emotional.
Yeah.
but that's the way it's organized. Some things are referenced in other policies, such as air quality and environment, hazardous materials, things like that. A lot of those things are also referenced, as Patty mentioned, in the guidelines that we're recommending be linked to the regulation. But yeah, you're right. It's in some ways it's mostly concentrated on nutrition, and then it has these other components that don't necessarily fit with nutrition, but then they don't go broad enough either.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other comments or questions before I show you the regulation recommendation?
Do any other board members have any comments? Patty, Jan, Barbara, I'm looking at my chat. Okay, I do. I would like to let the board know that I asked this last week to table this policy, JL, as I didn't feel it was really ready for a first read. I found the format and the language very confusing and repetitive. I found the policy to be very limiting because it was originally written, I don't know the exact date of when it was written, but once we had reading over the guidelines and knowing what student wellness encompasses today, it's very different from what I believe this first read of student wellness presents. And so I didn't feel that it did justice to what SUSD is doing on student wellness, what our goals and our objectives are. So I spoke with Dr. Creekard and Michelle Marshall and Patty Bilbrey about some changes that I think that on format and actually just making the policy clear and concrete, and that then connects, because one of the goals that Ms. Marshall mentioned is the alignment with this new student wellness guidelines. And I just don't feel that this policy encompasses all of that as it is written. I recognize that there's federal regulations from the USDA and the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act of 2010 that requires specific language in our school policy. And I'm not suggesting that these requirements are eliminated at all. But I don't find that the way that they're written, that they're that meaningful to the departments that have to follow them. And I asked a few questions on goals and objectives and annual reports that are mentioned in here, and I really didn't get a concrete answer. So I have this feeling that even though the words are all here, it's not meaningful the way that SUSD should be putting out a policy. I recognize it's ASBA's words, but I believe that as a school district, ASBA is a guide, and that as a district and as a governing board, we should be the ones making sure that the public policy that we're putting out is understood by everybody, and that when people read it, that they can actually let you know what it says and how it can be followed. So I really would like to see a bigger revamp than I recognize Board Member Kravitz pointed out some of the repetitiveness and maybe wordiness of some of these subsections, but I think it personally needs more to it. And I'd like to get a feel for how the other governing board members feel about that. And I'll take it if I don't hear from anybody, any other governing board members, they just don't have a comment. Patty Beckman?
So it's my understanding that we're updating this policy, but this one in particular, we're going to be modifying possibly pretty regularly, correct? I mean, Michelle, I know that the Wellness Committee and this policy has really progressed with regard to the committees that have been formed and doing work with relationship to this. So I see your point, President Beckham. I would like to see it maybe a little bit tighter, but I also know, or it's my feeling, that we're going to be looking at this again as our committees report back to us on the mental health component, on the nutrition component, etc. Michelle, would you anticipate that as well? I mean, I know we review them quite often, but this one in particular, as we get more information from, or guidelines, it seems like it's always going to be somewhat of a work in progress to get it succinct.
So that is true of the guidelines, which is why we are recommending linking those to the regulation, because the committee, like I said, did a lot of work and a lot of great work, and will continue to do that. And having it linked to the regulation gives them a little bit more flexibility to make changes more quickly than if they were in the policy. The policy, as with most policies, isn't designed to change a lot or often, except as statutes change, or as federal requirements or state requirements change. And so this model policy, the model policy, is consistent with what other school districts in Arizona and actually nationally have as their student wellness policy, because the Arizona School Boards Association is just one of, all state National School Boards Association policies. Often when I was looking to see, why is this language here? Or I would search and I would find it in all the other policies. So I understand the thought that this could be tighter or organized in a different way. And I don't really have an opinion about that. We're just doing what we usually do with policy, which is aligning as much as possible with the standard model, and then taking into account what the community, in this case in the form of our wellness committee, is looking for, and as well as our resident experts like Ms. Bilbrey on nutrition tell me that we need to have in our policy.
So does that make sense, Patty? Because that's my understanding too.
Yeah,
Michelle said this is not something we change often.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
I know. So it's going to be looking more. So then I guess linking the regulation to it, or the guidelines, as you said, would be, more what I was thinking as the committee worked hand in hand with this, just because I know there has been so much discovered and progress through that committee, and so much more to be done with regard to the mental health aspect. But no, you answered my question, and I agree with what Board Member Beckham said regarding kind of being a little bit, I don't know, more tighter, like you pointed out, Michelle, with the language. But okay, I get. Thank you.
If I may, I think that given the changes in the last several years and the growth of mental health issues, that a statement, if we have nutrition guidelines and recess guidelines, I think it'd be the appropriate thing to have a paragraph pointing out social emotional needs and what we are doing for them, and tying that, have the people who worked on the guidelines look at the guidelines. What is the appropriate policy short statement that leads somebody to those guidelines? And I think that's something that we can do before we bring it back, and we can certainly share once we have that with you in a memo before it comes for a vote, so you get to see it in advance. So I think that is something that we could add to it. And I know several of you have said it gets too wordy, too large, but we probably do need to add a small section, because that's the nature of what we are dealing with in society today, and we need to address that.
Dr. Creekard, thank you. So tying between what you and President Beckham said, I agree. We are really looking into through the work and Patty Bilbrey and Nutrition Services, leading. You know, we've got some great stuff going on here. I agree with everything. That would make me feel better.
And I think that we're going to see that in the next presentation. We outline what there's a presentation on those guidelines, and you will see the extensive work that this committee has done. And, you know, it's just all encompassing for what's going on now. And so I think that it really does show that how limiting this is. And I also think that some of the items, the way that they're formatted inside, they're not understood, and therefore they haven't been followed in years. And we need to make sure that those items that should be followed, so that we are in compliance, are brought out in a specific area so that they're not forgotten about again. So I completely agree. Any other comments? Okay.
Allison?
Yes, Barbara.
I have a request in there.
Oh, I don't see it. So
Oh.
we'll move up and see.
Well, strange. I thought I
Oh,
had.
there you are.
Oh, there I am. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, I just kind of want to highlight what I'm hearing and what I agree with, especially tonight, is to get you know, not go down the path of getting mired too much in practice and guidelines that for anything in our district we know needs to stay fluid and needs to be able to, you know, have exceptions or corrections or rethinking at various times. And when you're talking about policy, I've always been under the impression that, you know, that's step one. That's making sure we're following the law, following statute, and also giving an overall philosophy, you know, to the practices in our district and the guidelines, the regulations. So I would agree that we have to keep our policy itself concise, so that when all the groups and committees are really building up the practices and the understandings and trying to regulate things, it's clear. And so I guess I see it as, yes, kind of two different things, two different places. And my question would be on the social emotional or the mental wellness of our students. In some ways, I get the connection, I understand, but it's also so incredibly important. I see a need for that to be its own separate policy. And maybe there is a place in there. Ms. Marshall, you certainly point us in that direction if there is, but that's where I would lean to, rather than kind of throwing it all into this one policy. I'd be more inclined to see two concise, divided policies regarding the physical well-being of our students and the mental well-being of our students.
And I will say that I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of a policy that talks specifically about social emotional, but section J of the policy manual is all about students. So I'm going to let Patty talk about some of the other items that you talked about while I take a look at that.
Thanks for all of your feedback on this policy. I have had some significant discussion with the Department of Education too on this policy, and what, in all essence, nutrition services, when we have our triannual review, we do come and audit the actual policy for the district under our nutrition services review. So what they are looking for is very specific language, and a lot of that is what is included in this policy. Whether we love this language or not, some of this needs to be included. Do I agree that we could clean some of this up? Yes. Do I think that they would still find it appropriate and allowable and pass an audit? Yes. Do I think there's some things that we can't take? Sunscreen, you can't take it out. We can't take nutrition promotion and marketing out. It needs to be in there. Can we clean up some of this language? Yes. I think that when we talked about the guidelines, I think that many of you said this well, that the guidelines are what are going to be fluid. The policy is going to be pretty broad and shouldn't be very specific, except in the areas that is required to be in there for and I will be honest, nobody knows why all of a sudden sunscreen got added, but it did, and the USDA requires it to be in there for whatever reason. So it's in there. Where we're going to be a lot more fluid and a lot more detailed will be in our regulation. And you'll see that. I think you all have a copy of the regulation, and it is far more detailed than the policy. And that's where we need that to be, so we have that flexibility. We had a perfect example of the regulation with wipes. Could students use them or not? And during a pandemic situation, you might want to lean one direction than another right now without having to go to the board for approval because it's the right thing and we all agree it's the right thing to do for students. The policy is not going to change often because it requires board approval. So the discussions we've had in the last few days, we can look at this. Michelle and I have or Miss Marshall, I guess I should call her. We've discussed it a little bit where we can make some edits and clean it up. I like some of just the redundant language right now that we've discussed about that needs to come out. I've talked with board member Beckham. I think we're going to be fine on our second read with you. And just trust that where we've got some unique and maybe unusual language left in there, it's because it's required. It's not because it was our choice to put it in there. It's actually a requirement. And I am going to run this through our specialists with the Department of Education and Health and Nutrition Services too before the second read. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. It
Okay.
does. Thank you, Ms. Bilbrey. Michael Greenberg has a comment.
Dr. Creekard, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just trying to wrap it up to say I think we have pretty clear direction. We'll look at that mental awareness issue, see if there is a place in policy that we could refer to from here to a separate policy or whether we'd add it there, but that's something that we could look at. And then the language itself that Patty had just addressed, the committee going through that language again with a fine-tooth comb. And I think we have our work cut out for us, but I'll yield to Member Greenberg.
No, I would actually just agree with Dr. Creekard's comments, and I would just say that this is a common discussion we have whenever we're revising policy, right, about the specificity involved. And, I was actually just kind of flipping through some of them, and if we think about our public comment thing, it doesn't say people will only have 3 minutes to speak. It says, people must adhere to any time limit we set, right? So, obviously, it's kind of difficult because oftentimes we view it as almost legislation that we should be specifying every detail, but just because of how these policies change, oftentimes the regulation is maybe the better place to do it. And sometimes I'm sure the board policy leaves it open to interpretation as to how those should be accomplished, and we might not agree with what certain officials deem to be in the regulation adequate there, but we can always review that if we're getting feedback that something is not working, we can always tighten it up. So that's all I wanted to add there.
All right, thank you, Board Member Greenberg. I will mention that what was brought up, Ms. Marshall, I believe you said that there were other policies for environment and whatnot. Those were not included at the end where we have cross-reference. We might want to add those. And then also it had a cross-reference for policy EFDA and IA. And I went to our website and we do not have those policies on our website. So I don't know if they're part of our policy manual or not. So that's something to look at also.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, all right. All right, thank you very much, Ms. Marshall and Ms. Bilbrey. Dr. Creekard, we'll move on to, is there a comment?
No, I'm waiting.
We'll move on to information item C, the wellness guidelines update. And I think it's very exciting what has transpired in the past year. Dr. Creekard, do you have any comments? And would you please introduce our presenter?
Yes, so Patty will continue with her discussion, and she'll be joined by Dr. Chestnut, who also co-chaired that wellness committee. So Steve and Patty.
Well, good evening, President Beckham, members of the governing board, Dr. Creekard. It's a great pleasure for Patty and I to be here to present this information to you. And that was a good warm-up conversation. So you definitely have a general idea of what we want to talk about. One thing I think I did want to mention, I know that John Marshall mentioned it several times, and that is that the regulation, the proposal will be to eventually have the regulation have only the wording to the effect that we're going to link the wellness guidelines to the regulation. In other words, follow this link and you can see what the 11 pages of the wellness guidelines are. So hopefully that's not confusing. It's easy to get confused between policy, regulation, and guidelines, but our wellness committee has spent a lot of time on the guidelines, so I just wanted to point that out and make that clear. Also, I do have a PowerPoint here, and I'm going to try and share it. So let me see if I can get that on the screen. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, good. So this is very exciting, my first virtual board meeting, so we'll see how this goes. But we're very pleased to be here to make this presentation. We spent a lot of time on this with the committee, and they were really quite wonderful. Did a great job, and Patty's a real expert in her area of nutrition services, so it's been quite an adventure that started a long time ago, but we are trying to bring this to closure for now, and I think we have some good things to report. So, as you know, the current board policy in its current form was adopted in 2014. But that policy says that the Wellness Committee is responsible for establishing and measuring the implementation of that policy. So when our Wellness Committee started meeting back in February of 2019, we looked at our current wellness guidelines, which were quite short and brief. And there really wasn't a lot there. It was really not much more than just what was in the board policy. So we felt like we needed to basically come up with a restart on the wellness guidelines so that we could do justice to the policy JL and then truly measure the implementation. So anyway, that's kind of the way we took it when we started our work at that time. And then, of course, we're supposed to make an annual report to the board. So this is our second year in a row that Patty and I get to do that. Patty, anything you want to add?
Nope, you're doing a great job. I'll add my color commentary where needed.
Okay. Well, we had a wonderful committee. They were just really quite super and pleasure to work with. They put in a lot of time. We met every 2 weeks. There was subcommittee time on top of that, but it included 5 parents, 2 teachers, 1 teacher counselor. We included a high school student. We had an administrator, a principal. We had the 2 co-lead nurses. So we had a very well-qualified committee this school year, and they were almost all carryovers from when we started back in February of 2019. So anyway, we greatly appreciate their efforts, and very passionate committee, and it was actually a lot of fun. Patty, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think what was kind of unique about this committee is we've had wellness committees for many, many years. I've been here 15 years, and I would say this was the most engaged wellness committee outside of just district personnel. We always had district personnel who showed up before, and it was really refreshing to see parents and even having a student come and who actually spoke up quite often. So we feel that these guidelines really do encompass what our community feels, and I feel better about it, not just what we assume they think, but we really did hear from them a lot, and that was a good thing.
So here's the timeline that I mentioned. We started in February of 2019. We worked on them all spring. We did take the summer off, but by November, we took it for cabinet level review, and Dr. Sakos, Dr. Hagigat worked with us on making sure that the guidelines were following current board policy and the current regulations that are in the policy book at this time. So after that, we took a review of the draft guidelines and took those to the principals. And then we took all that feedback back to the Wellness Committee in January 2020. Now, a lot has happened between then and now, which is our presentation to the governing board. So that kind of explains why there's a big gap there. But we think that the next steps will be that the staff should complete a wellness guideline Moodle, because we need to make sure that all of our staff, certified and classified, are aware of the detail in the wellness guidelines so that they can follow up on them. And I think that that would be one way to educate them. I think that's something that will have to be reemphasized in staff meetings. I think principals will play a key role in implementation and that kind of thing. Then we recommend that when the 2021 school year starts with students in buildings, that those new wellness guidelines be implemented and that the committee reconvene and start its annual process over again in September 2020. That's really, I think, the way this policy is written, the governing board policy. And the idea is that this is an ongoing committee that annually reviews the policy and the guidelines to see that implementation is taking place and that adjustments are made as necessary. So that is the timeline that we've been following and the way we see it going forward. Patty, did you want to add anything to that?
I just think it's important to note here that with the previous discussion item, which is the actual board policy, once we have an updated and approved policy, it actually helps the committee as we move forward. Our policy was a bit outdated and had some old language in there that actually tied our hands from doing some even more forward-thinking work and some better wellness work for our students. So we do think that being able to bring this policy back to a more broad policy will be helpful, and I think you'll see some ongoing work from the committee that is very exciting, and I think something all of our community would like to see. So there's a lot of work still to be done.
So moving on. We use the Alliance for Healthier Generation materials. It's a well-respected national organization that has a lot of excellent wellness committee, or I should say wellness guideline information. And that information was very helpful to us. We also use information from the whole school, whole community, whole child model from the Center for Disease Control. We adopted it for our use in SUSD. And that model, it's a little hard to see there on the screen, but the blue area, the spokes of the wheel, really are the 10 areas of wellness. And I think the point was well made in the previous discussion that wellness programs done right in a school district include more than nutrition, environment, physical education, physical activity. Those two are listed, those two items are listed in that wheel there in the blue section, but there's 8 other areas, including community involvement, family engagement, employee wellness, health services, social and emotional climate, counseling, psychology and social services, health education, and physical environment. So this is really, I don't know if I should use the word gold standard, but it's a wonderful model of what wellness policy, well, I should say wellness guidelines should include in school district. So Patty, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that you said, when you said it was a gold standard, one of the words used by some of our, not consultants, but folks who work in this industry doing wellness policies said that we've basically got a Cadillac policy in our district. And if you look at other school districts, they did the minimum of what was required in the actual guidelines. And by using this whole child, or the whole community, whole child model, we were able to capture everything. I think that what was discussed in the previous discussion, you'll see that this helps guide us to make sure that we are hitting all those tenets. And I think that's really important. And I think it's a testament to this committee that they did a really good job of making sure that we didn't leave any stone unturned. That's it.
So moving on, hopefully you had a chance to look at the wellness guidelines document itself. It's 11 pages. We started out with about 25 pages, and we spent a lot of time editing it and getting it down to really what is the heart of the matter. And so there's really 3 sections in that document. It describes the Wellness Committee in the first section, and it describes wellness guidelines implementation in the second part, which includes things like the implementation plan, record keeping, annual notification. There's several sections in there that kind of flesh that out. And then the third section really are the 10 components of a whole school, whole child, whole community model, with some brief recommendations on how to implement each of those components. And this is an area, if you ask the committee members, they would say, you know, we're going to come back and look at those, you know, 6 or 7 of those components. We didn't flesh them out as much as we wanted, but we think we have a good framework, and that we can continue to work on them each year as is intended. Patty, anything you want to add there?
I'm good.
And any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Chestnut and Ms. Bilbrey. Are there any questions? I'll be looking at my meeting chat column. Yes, Board Member Kravitz has a question.
So we're talking about wellness, and we've been having a discussion about nutrition and physical education, yet our district guidelines, I guess they are, for middle school requires 1 semester of PE, and in high school we require 2. I'm interested to know how many students in middle school take more than just 1 semester. And in high school, how many students, and I know you don't have that information right now, but you know, how many take more than 1 or 2 semesters total in high school? Because if we're going to talk about wellness, I think physical education is a big part of that. And it might, you know, let me back up. When I moved to this district as a sophomore in high school, I was thrilled that I only had to take 1 year of PE, because I took that in 9th grade in New Jersey. And if I'd stayed in New Jersey, I'd need 4 years of PE and wearing a horrible PE uniform. So when I got to Chaparral and I only had to take 1 year, I thought that was terrific. And that's, you know, but pardon the pun, but 2020 hindsight, I wish now that I had to have had more PE. So I'm interested to know how many students, you know, in each high school take more than that. If we're going to talk about wellness, you know, I'm glad we moved on from the days where we had snack bars at our high schools that were serving soda, corn nuts, candy. This may sound familiar to you, Dr. Creekard. So we are moving forward, but we may, you know, want to look at our policy with regard to how much physical education of some sort, whether it's PE or a specific activity, that we encourage our students to take it, especially at the middle school and high school levels.
Can I ask a question real quick to that? So you mentioned policy. Now, is that something that you, Dr. Chestnut and Ms. Bilbrey, you would think that something that specific would be in the guideline, not the policy?
Do you want me to answer that, Dr. Chestnut, or are you ready?
You know, my internet dropped and I lost that last question.
So I'll answer that. When we talk about in the guidelines, when you talk about either instructional minutes, how many hours of PE, how long a lunch hour should be, I think there are embedded in there a few best practices, but to put in the guidelines that you shall do this is not necessarily the work of the wellness committee, because we can say you shall have no less than 30 minutes of lunch. You shall require 4 years of PE. But if the dollars aren't there in the district and the curriculum team or the instructional minutes can't handle that, it's a moot point. So I think that we give best practices that perhaps then could be looked at through other committees, and it's really not the wellness committees, I think, responsibility, nor is it really their frame of reference to be able to know what they could put in there that would be specific to those types of suggestions. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
It makes sense to me. I'll pipe in. It makes sense to me. And I'm not trying to suggest we need to go, changing our policy of what our graduation requirements are. I know that students have a lot to fill in their 4 years, especially in high school, to fill in. But if we're encouraging
It does,
best
to me,
nutritional practices, and healthy eating, we may want to encourage students to take more PE or some other a similar activity. And that's why I'm interested to know how many of our students take more than what is required to graduate. Thank you.
If I may, I think that's information that would be interesting to gather, since we have grown in high school sports, offering a class during the year. We probably have more than we did when you were at Chaparral and I was your assistant principal. But I think that would be interesting information that I think Michelle Irvin, who oversees PE, would be able to get from CIMAR, and just for teaching and learning and wellness. As these committees meet, there's always overlap. And so what I have been encouraging lately, and especially as we go into some very intense discussions about school opening next year, that committees share out with other people, and that those cabinet members, especially who have some responsibility for one committee or another, are sharing that in cabinet, so that we find out, oh, here's an area that this committee brought up but doesn't feel that it's part of their role, but we should probably look at that and certainly look at the data from the others. So that's a good suggestion, and I think out of interest, we'll be looking to see what percentages are at the high school and middle school exceed the minimum.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that will be good information and data to have. I would like to just ask if hypothetically, and it could be, just taking this as an example, what area or department or who actually would be making that decision if you change the curriculum to include more than one semester or 1 year of PE?
That's the high school planning guide.
Okay.
Group. Yeah.
All right, great, thank you. All right, any other questions from board members? I don't see any other questions. Kind of dragging it on in case there's somebody who wants to say something. All right then. Thank you very much, Dr. Chestnut and Ms. Bilbrey. And especially thank you also for that committee of parents, teachers, administrators, and our student, because I do know it was a lot of time and a very engaging committee, as you had said. So really good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think too, one of the points that to make is that this wellness committee, I mean, they really had a passion for educating our students on the importance of personal health and safety and wellness. And I think, and I'm hoping that's coming out to our community, that is something that we're really concentrating on. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
So moved. Oh boy, I had my head down. Was that Miss
It's
Perlberg?
Barbara. Sorry.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Beckman. We'll have an individual vote, starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Really quickly, may I ask a quick question?
Yes, discussion.
Very quick discussion question. On the personnel action items, Dr. Creekard, or maybe Dr. Bowman, my memory is not so good about what we did last year. For all personnel that we've just issued contracts to that approve it, is that something that we need to vote on?
No, you voted on the contract and the salary schedule. And so people are placed on that salary schedule appropriately as a group with that vote.
And so the continuation of all of our certified, classified, administrative that have been issued the contract and agreed to it, we don't need to vote on that.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. Sorry, I just wanted to question. All right. Apologies, everyone.
Oh, no, that's a very valid question. We'll start with our individual vote again, unless there's somebody else who has a discussion item. All right, Jan Michael Greenberg,
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz,
Aye.
Barbara Perlberg,
Aye.
Patty Beckman,
Aye.
and Allison Beckham, aye. Motion passes 5-0 to approve our consent agenda.
Now, President Beck, if I, before we move on to the action items, I would like to highlight two new hires that were on the personnel action item that you just approved. First of all, Mr. Chris Hodo, new principal for Pima Traditional School. Mr. Hodo comes to us from Iowa. While this last year he was working in as a principal of a charter school in Chandler, I believe. But his degrees, he has 3 degrees from first one from Iowa State University and 2 from Drake University, all in Iowa, and he has a wonderful resume of being an assistant principal at an elementary school in Sioux City, Iowa for a number of years and been in that city until he moved here to Phoenix. We welcome him. We believe his enthusiasm and background will be really appreciated by the Pima students and community. Secondly, we welcome Dr. Kane Jagodzinski as principal of Arcadia High School. His background is also varied, but here in Arizona, he attended school at Northern Arizona University and 1 graduate degree from ASU and the other his doctorate from NAU. Most recently, and I think what was really made him stand out over other outstanding candidates was his experience as principal of Fountain Hills High School, where he turned the climate around, the rigor of the academics, and for 4 years as a high school principal, dealt with all of the things that high school principals deal with, and that experience that he brings, I think, will be welcome. I know personally that he was very, very well regarded as an administrator in Paradise Valley before he went to Fountain Hills. And we welcome Dr. Jagodzinski as well as Mr. Hodo, and I think they're great additions to our administrative staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Creekard, and welcome to our new principals. Action item A is authorization of expenditures for Saguaro High School Innovation Center. It's a new construction. Dr. Creekard, would you like to introduce our presenter?
I would, but first I would like to say that this is a project that has been very interesting to watch from its inception. And I know we had a report last spring on it, and actually our Student Advisory Board President Kaylee Patel spoke in favor of it. We're taking an unsightly place on Saguaro's campus, making it into an innovation center, which fits with the Math Science Academy, as well as their very outstanding robotics program. And this is the prototype for what hopefully will happen across the district at other high schools as well. It is the modern world of students being able to do hands-on problem solving in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So with that, I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Rayler again, who will introduce this action item of the Innovation Center at Saguaro High School. Dennis.
Good evening, President Beckham again, board members. I am absolutely thrilled to bring this one to you. This one was probably the most fun to put together with the students and the staff, the administration. the Farley Family Charitable Foundation, Nan Strohmeyer with the SUSD Foundation, all participants in coming up with this idea for the Saguaro Innovation Center. I don't want to presume questions at this point, but I do have some slides that I can share. So I'd like to open it up for questions right off the bat and share these slides, and then we can see where this takes us. The first one I'd like to share is the rendering of the property with the work from Frank Slingerland, Sue Gray, and Robert Johnson at BWS Architects, and their guidance and their experience with this committee and bringing us this new endeavor here at Saguaro High School. The bottom picture, what you're looking at there, is if you were standing in the courtyard just outside the gymnasium.
We can't see anything, Dennis. We can't see.
Yeah.
Always that sharing component, huh? How's that? Coming?
No, not yet. Oh, wait. Maybe. Yes, there we are.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So this bottom rendering here, this shows you if you were coming in, if you could see my cursor here on the right-hand side, you were coming in from the classroom building or the front office through the courtyard and over to the cafeteria, which is over here. This is what you would run into. This building here is an existing building, and this building here is what once was or soon once was the cage, as they so named it, filled with pigeons. And I think they'll be happy to get rid of that little component of their school and to replace it with this 5,000 square foot innovation center. So any questions that I can point you in the right direction? I'll share the floor plan with you as well. Anything about the process, anything like that?
Okay, do any board members have questions? I'm looking at my chat list.
No questions.
Not coming up with any questions?
That's not possible.
Well, we will see, Dennis, you did meet with us 2 weeks ago, you know, as in twosomes or as one, and went over this project. So maybe that's part of the reason.
Okay, I'll take that as I did a good job for you.
Yes.
So just for the public's benefit, as you walk in from the south, we've got a large classroom, collaboration lab, storage, bathroom, a print lab for the 3D printers, another large space for the robotics program, their robotics field. They're calling it a tech lab. And then finally, another large space that they will have all of their equipment, laser cutters, CNC machines, band saws, you name it, they're going to have it. And that is in large part by the work that they're doing, partnering with local businesses and support from the SUSD Foundation and the Farley Family Charitable Foundation. So most of this equipment will be supported through those folks. Those are not district funds that are going to put the equipment in this room. Then as you progress north through the building, it'll open up a big garage door to be able to back their trailer in to load up their robot, and a large yard for storage, outdoor welding, and this is all accessible to what is now the north student parking lot. So again, a very exciting project. The students were, I want to call them kids, but the students were extremely engaged and thoughtful, and I can't thank them enough for participating in this. They were despite their busy school and after extracurricular activities, they were always engaged. Chris Brandt, teacher over there at Saguaro, was instrumental in pushing this thing along, and we're super excited to bring this to Saguaro High School.
Thanks for your patience. I keep on having to unmute. Any questions from board members? Not so far. Dennis, is this your last slide, or do you have another slide?
I have other stuff, but if there's no questions, then there's really no use showing them. Seeing the rendering and seeing the floor plan is really the primary point of showing you this stuff.
And what you're asking for today, if you just go through your request, your funds, and the timeline.
So we are asking for the board to approve a authorization of $1,462,567 to McCarthy Builders. That is coming out of bond, although a small portion of that, $42,432 of that $1,462,000 is adjacent waste funds. We've got some fire lane work within the area. So total spend for the bond is $1,420,135. And that's coming from bond funds. We've established that when we originally asked to move forward with this project. And our timeline is basically they're going to start next week. Plans are already in with the city, and the expectation is that those will be popping out. So we'll start demolition. We don't need plans and permits for demolition. So we'll move forward with that, and within the next couple of weeks, we should have our permits back from the city. So the expectation is before the summer is over, we'll have the old building gone, the area graded, the foundation in place, and starting to build up the box that'll make up the Innovation Center. And then the expectation is that we'll have it done in late fall of this year.
Okay. All right, great. And we do have a question from Vice President Beckman.
Not really a question, just a comment. Thank you, Dennis. I know his students are incredibly excited, including my own students. This has been a long time coming. And with the growth of the program, the incoming freshman class for the MSA is bigger than it's ever been. So this is needed. And one thing I wanted to point out that you told me when you gave the presentation to us 2x2 was that it is poised to growth, which is good to hear. You know, you don't really want to build for a program where it is currently, but you want to look to the future so we don't have to employ dollars later on to encompass that growth. And you said that it is. And so I think that's fantastic. And the kids are incredibly excited, as well as the teachers over there. So thank you for all you've done.
Thank you. And I didn't put my picture on my computer, but if you haven't been by Saguaro in the last few days, last Friday, the 15th, Summit West Signs installed the new MSA sign on the front of the building, and it looks fantastic. So if there isn't enough growth because they don't know about the program, now there's no reason not to know about it. The sign's bigger than life.
That's fantastic. Okay, any other comments or questions? One last time. Any further discussion before we take this to a vote? All right, do I have a motion to approve action item A as presented?
So moved.
Vice President Beckman moves. Do I have a second?
Second from Sandy Kravitz.
And Board Member Kravitz. We'll have an individual vote, starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz.
Aye.
Barbara Proberg.
A very happy aye, yes.
Patty Beckman.
Yes, aye.
And Allison Beckham, yes. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Dennis, and your extensive team that's worked on this.
Thank you.
We'll move on to action item B, approval of revisions of the Student Code of Conduct. Dr. Creekar, would you like to introduce our presenter?
Yes, thank you. Presenting again tonight is Dr. Chestnut, who also chairs the Student Code of Conduct Committee, and he will be presenting the revisions to be voted on. Thank you, Dr. Chestnut.
Thank you, Dr. Creekard. President Beckham, members of the governing board, I'm back here for my second presentation. Can you see me? I'm not sure if you can.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's a good sign. I have another PowerPoint, of course. So let's see if I can't get that on the screen. Can you see that? Okay, that looks like a thumbs up. So press the wrong button already. Let me try again. Okay, here we go. So I had another excellent committee to work with on the Uniform Code of Conduct. And that included one teacher. It included 2 APs from middle school level, 2 APs from high school, and then our district athletic director. So they had a lot of good input, which I greatly appreciated. We reviewed our purpose as a committee, and we reviewed our guiding principles. And I just want to point out that our guiding principles really include creating a positive learning climate at each school. So the Uniform Code is a lot about student behavior, student discipline, student disciplinary consequences for infractions. But at the same time, we know that the focus is on a positive learning climate and on prevention. And we know that the research says that students respond to our expectations. And if we have clear, appropriate, consistent expectations, that makes a wonderful foundation, for learning in a school. So that's really our goal as a committee, to make sure that the Uniform Code does that. And it's so important. Uniform Code does a lot to set the safety level. And, school safety is really at a very low level. It starts with name calling and bullying, on the elementary playground. It starts with, pushing and shoving in the hallway at the middle school. And so it's important to have expectations clearly laid out. We want to make it very clear that our schools are safe. Because if kids don't feel safe, they can't learn. If mom and dad don't think the school is safe, they're not going to send their kids there. So it's a big deal. And we actually have amazing staff members that make this code of conduct work. And that's, I think, another part of it that's often overlooked, is that our teachers do a wonderful job in the classroom of setting those behavior expectations. Our assistant principals and our principals do a wonderful job of doing that on a school-wide basis. And so, because I have the opportunity to work with assistant principals in particular, but principals on this issue of student discipline and implementing the Uniform Code, I can tell you that our staff does an amazing job. And that really is a credit to all of our staff. And I know that even our support staff, our bus drivers and our other support staff members, they do a wonderful job of making sure that kids are safe and that they're following the expectations for behavior that we have in place. I also just want to make the point that it is really a foundation piece of social emotional learning, the social emotional climate that we're trying to create in each school, focused on a positive learning climate and prevention. And so we had a good year this year in emphasizing, re-emphasizing, rebuilding, improving social emotional programs like our positive behavior intervention and supports, our PBS programs at schools. We had good training in that area this year. We implemented the Sanford Harmony social emotional curriculum in all of our K-5 schools, every classroom. That training occurred a year ago, and teachers implemented this year. That was a wonderful addition to our social emotional learning platform. We trained assistant principals in restorative practices and the comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines, the new guidelines from the state of Arizona. We continued with our JFCS specialists, providing those needed counseling services to elementary. We had prevention coaches in place at our high schools. Our social workers did a wonderful job, and counselors do a great job of providing social emotional groups for our K-12 students, in addition to all their regular administrative responsibilities. So a lot of good stuff going on there. And then it was the last year of our high school health and wellness grant. And Shannon Cron, of course, is really our social emotional expert. And she is heavily involved in all of these programs but her leadership is outstanding in this area. And we had a good year in social emotional learning, still a lot of room for improvement and growth, but uniform code was an important part of that. Excuse me. So changes to the code were minimal this year. We did minor language edits to add clarity to the language. We did minor adjustments to the disciplinary consequences in a few places. We added a new paragraph concerning cell phones because, believe it or not, our students still bring a lot of cell phones to school. And so that's an area that we need a little bit more direction on in the code, we felt. We added a new paragraph to provide more explanation concerning harassment, inappropriate language, and verbal provocation. And those were the main changes, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All right, do we have any board members that have questions? I'm watching the meeting chat. Yes, Board Member Kravitz. Board Member Kravitz.
Sorry, I was having technical difficulties. I noticed on page 11, Dr. Chestnut, under eligibility requirements, where it says students will request weekly grade updates from teachers, that has been removed. Why is that?
That's just not our current practice. And so we just put the language in there that made it congruent with our current practice.
What is the current practice?
Nathan Slater, as our athletic director, he was on that committee. He told us what it was, and I cannot remember off the top of my head.
Well, let me help you out. Teachers now can go on, coaches can go on the student view, parent view, and see what the reports are weekly on their athletes. They no longer have to have the students carry the grade reports to them. So it's all done online now.
Well, is there a way? I mean, I think that the student should have some ownership and responsibility in terms of showing to their coach that they've, improved on their GPA. Isn't it possible for the student to send that information to their coach?
I'm sure that's possible, and some may be doing that. The students carry that responsibility with them because they know who's watching at all times, watching their grades, and especially when it comes to those issues of whether they're going to be eligible or not. So that is there, but we have the capability that it doesn't have to be on paper, nor does it have to be, this kid forgot this time, and so you got to track that down. But that's in reality what has been happening. That was the question, what's really happening. They're doing it online now.
Okay, and another question I have is, and perhaps it's in here and I'm just missing it. If a student has below a 2.0 in any of their classes, can they participate? I understand the overall GPA has to be above 2.0, but if they have less than a 2.0 in one of their classes, can they participate in an athletic tournament?
I'm not certain. I don't believe so.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Jan Michael Greenberg has a comment.
Yeah. First, on that point, thinking back to when I was on the tennis team at Arcadia, I don't think any one of us ever presented our GPAs or anything to our. I don't know how long that language has been in there, but we certainly knew that we had to have a GPA above 2.0 or whatever the limit was at the time. And I don't think we ever provided that information, especially not on a weekly basis, to our tennis coach or anything like that. So, I think it's easy enough for teachers to assess this. And obviously if a student ignores that and is caught, there are consequences that we see. I did just want to make a comment, though, about the harassment, inappropriate language, verbal provocation, that I appreciate that has been added in there. Obviously, whenever it comes to speech rights and everything's, we have to be careful. But all in all, I think it's, I think it's an important thing because we have been dealing with this issue on a number of campuses, racial sensitivities. And, we've seen that with the town halls, which are fantastic. The teen town halls that our president and vice president have been working on organizing with other administrators present. So, that's really good. And I just want to thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Patty Beckman has a comment.
Sorry if I cut in and out. I think my internet's being weird, but I wanted to say both my daughters routinely their coaches correspond with them on like an app or something, and they will say, just so you know, we have a grade check happening on this date. So, and if you have below or you are failing any of your classes, there's, you could have a consequence and not be eligible or whatever. So there is a constant communication about that. So I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Patty, for that clarity. I thought I'd just jump in. Okay.
Any other comments? I had a comment, and that was on the restorative justice practices. I know that when Sandy and I first came on the board, they were just starting to be talked about, and it now sounds like they're actually being put into practice. So that is much appreciated. I didn't get a chance to actually read what was added. I think you said on page 9. Is it short enough that you can read since it's brand new and our community has not heard it yet?
You mean read it right now?
Mm-hmm. Unless it's long.
It's not long. It's just a matter of finding it.
I think you said it was on page 9.
Yes.
Oh, you don't have it up there. Okay.
I don't have it up.
Okay, that's fine. Also, something that I just thought of when you were giving your presentation, we also started, you said that, the Sanford Harmony Social Emotional Curriculum for K through 5. And we're starting the restorative justice practices. I would like to ask that maybe next year we, your department will add that you'll do a program review. So with the data on how effective those programs have been. I think that would be very helpful for the board to hear. The only other item that I still have a little bit of a question on, and I asked, and maybe it's just a little bit of an explanation, is that and I'm going off the top of my head here, language inappropriateness and defiance of authority, both all were given additional suspension days out of school. They were increased, and that they were increased to be greater than lying and I'm trying to think of the word that was, minor aggressive acts. And that balance didn't really set well with me. And I understand the answer that was given was because, well, I'll let you answer that. But I am wondering why we're increasing suspension days on somebody who's using inappropriate language. I think if it isn't working with the 5 that we're already doing, maybe suspension days aren't working and we need to be doing some other type of consequence. Has that been thought about at all?
Well, I do have to say that I would say that every principal and assistant principal would agree with you that suspension is not a magic bullet and doesn't solve every problem. What the assistant principals on the committee were saying and what they were hearing is that inappropriate language is just a very common problem. That's why we added the paragraph at the very end of the document to really give a little bit more specificity as to what that means. And principals are telling me that assistant principals are telling me there's just a wide range of the kind of inappropriate language that kids are using. And so they felt like they would appreciate having a little bit more flexibility if needed, if there's some outrageous language, have a bigger consequence. And, I think assistant principals and principals do a good job of trying to make disciplinary infractions a teachable moment and help kids learn better behavior. But sometimes it helps to have a range of consequences. Also, Most of the middle column, 6 through 8 middle school consequences align with high school. There's only 2 or 3 that don't. And so those 2 changes that you mentioned did align those consequences for middle school students with the high school. And that was the rationale of the committee.
Well, I guess I'm just still a little concerned with the rationale, and maybe do we need to be looking at a different type of consequences to provide the flexibility that was something that may be more effective, and that's something just for your department to look at.
No, I totally agree with that, and that's why we're very excited to have restorative practices in place, and we see assistant principals using them. And inappropriate language is an example of a time when I've seen those being used this year. So, the maximum suspension isn't the automatic go-to consequence, but it is available if needed.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right.
Yes.
Did you? Comment. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. So to answer your question about the introduction of restorative practices, it's actually included pretty much on every page at the bottom, and the pointing out, which is what you were pointing out, was that nothing is intended. It says nothing in this handbook is intended to restrict the district from imposing more or less severe consequences or using restorative practices if, in the discretion of the district, the severity of harm, danger, damage, or the potential for harm warrants it, etc. So I think we all agree that suspension for inappropriate, depending on what inappropriate language really means, and again, as I pointed out, we do have to be careful when it comes to language and what people wear and, etc. For constitutional reasons. But obviously that issue of, suspension versus perhaps another thing might be more appropriate. It seems from the handbook that the principals and teachers can assess that on a case-by-case basis. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes, I think it's very much a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and then the harassment language, I do think it's good because it is targeting, it's not really about inappropriate, it is inappropriate language, but it is really about targeting language or what people wear or however they communicate based on race, color, religion, sex, age, national origin, ancestry, etc. So it's very specific cases about, some of the issues we've seen. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because you had, Board President Beckman, you had asked about the restorative justice piece as amended.
Well, I think too, you were adding a definition of it, weren't you, Dr. Chestnut?
Correct. Yes, once this thing gets ready for publication, we start going through it, and yes, that is something we needed to add. So I'm not sure if the board has the most recent document. Most recent one has a 1-paragraph explanation up front with all the other definitions of what restorative practices are.
And that's what.
Do you want me to read it? Do you want me to read it? Board President, well, do you want it? Okay, so it says, restorative practices can be used by administrators and teachers to resolve problems between parties that have experienced harm. These practices focus on repairing the harm that has been done. This is a non-traditional way of dealing with problems between students, as well as between staff and students. The goal is for students to come to an understanding of the root cause of the problem and to talk about it with an administrator or teacher trained in using restorative practices. These practices have been proven to reduce suspensions, expulsions, and repeat behavior between the parties involved. Restorative practices can also be used in conjunction with traditional disciplinary consequences.
Thank you very much for reading, because that is something that's brand new to the district and brand new to the student handbook. So I think it's important to highlight it. So thank you very much, Board Member Greenberg. Any other comments or questions? All right. Do I have a motion to approve action item B as presented?
So moved.
Board Member Greenberg moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Kravitz seconds. We'll have an individual vote starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz.
Aye.
Barbara Perlberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
and Allison Beckham. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Dr. Chestnut, and your team that put together the amendments to the Student Code of Conduct.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We'll move on to action item C, approval of supplemental book list for secondary English language arts, ELA, and social studies for the 2020-2021 school year. Dr. Creekard, would you like to introduce our presenter?
Yes, thank you, President Beckham and members of the board. This has been a little bit of a hot topic in the last couple of years, but Teaching and Learning has done a great job working with, in this case, English teachers in following a process, and that will be described. Actually, items C and D deal with the same overall thing. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Guerin, and when we get to D, we probably can go directly back to her or to Cheryl Redder, whichever she prefers, because they are tied together, but because they're a little different, we present them as two separate action items. So this time I'll introduce Dr. Guerin.
President Beckham, governing board members, and Dr. Creekart, the Teaching and Learning team will be presenting supplemental materials and books for your approval this evening. As you know, this is an annual process. Cheryl Redner, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, will start our presentation.
Good evening, President Beckham, members of the board, and Dr. Creekard. It's a privilege to present to you the updated supplemental book and material list, as well as share with you the processes that have been in place to ensure that the systems are transparent and we involve input from relevant stakeholder groups. First, I'd like to go over the agenda that we will be presenting tonight. We will be defining the categories of the materials that we use. Our governing board adopted materials are vetted for use during the school year as well as during summer programs. So to start with our agenda, we're going to review the definitions of what the adopted materials look like, as well as the supplemental and the ancillary curriculum looks like. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. We're also going to revisit what happened during the 2019 process, the approval process within our area, and then we're going to update you on the processes used to vet the supplemental book list as well as the supplemental materials list. So I'm going to start by defining the adopted books, and so and materials. Those are materials that go through that formal process. So if you remember, this year we just went through the world language adoption process. We go through a cycle. We include committee members and stakeholders to include teachers and administrators, district and site administrators, and gather input. We go through those timelines, and then we bring that to you for approval. The next one is the supplemental books and novels. Those are class sets and books that are used within the classroom, and these are the list that we're going to bring to you as Dr. Guerin mentioned on an annual basis. We have our supplemental materials. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that in a couple of moments. But those are teaching and learning supported materials, and that means that we support it not only through our teaching and learning coaches, but as well as fiscally. And then our ancillary materials, and we talked about this a lot last year, those are teacher materials that are used in classrooms and oversight is given to the principals. And with that, I'd like to introduce Paul Becker, who is our secondary language arts coach.
Good evening. During this academic year, English teachers have selected books from the middle and high school supplemental lists for instructional use. If a book was not on this list, then a teacher would make a proposal to the supplemental book committee to add this text. The members of the supplemental book committee represent our stakeholder groups. We have administrator, teacher, parent, media specialist, and district representation. They meet on an as-needed basis, not only to approve a proposed book, but also to review any text suggested by a community member. When the committee reviews a book, we use a rubric to review literary merit, content concerns, and age appropriateness. After reaching a consensus, the committee would then either make a recommendation for approval or disapproval. For the middle school list, we've added 3 new books for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. We also had a book that was suggested for review called Unwind. Each member of the committee read this book and evaluated using the same rubric as described above. After discussion, the committee recommended that this book stay available for instructional use for the 8th grade classroom. With regards to the high school supplemental book list, we have had several titles for 9 through 12, with the most recent text, The Unbearable Lightness of Being included last week. Even though we have been physically distant for the past 6 weeks or so, the Supplemental Book Committee met remotely during this pandemic using video conference technology. If a student or a parent has any concern regarding any book that's on the middle or high school list being studied in the classroom, all he or she would need to do is speak to the teacher for an alternate text, and the teacher will work with the student. This is considered one of our best practices for our English language arts classrooms. And now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Steve Williamson, the K-12 social sciences coach.
Good evening. Like English language arts, social science uses supplementary books. Social science will follow the same process as English language arts uses, but we have 2 exceptions. We will have a 6-12 committee made up of teachers, media specialists, principals, and parents. Our rubric will focus on content standards and the appropriateness of the book. Where we are in the process. I've submitted the current list of books that are being used for your approval. The current books have been used without incident. I've started forming a committee, and our first meeting will be in the fall. Thank you for your time. Now I'll turn the presentation over to Dr. Fountain, the Director of Curriculum.
Good evening. For the supplemental materials list, I'm not sure if I'm on camera, but for the supplemental materials list, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
sorry.
Yes, we can hear you, and the PowerPoint is up.
Perfect. For the supplemental materials list, as Ms. Redner mentioned, these are the teaching and learning supported materials. These are district provided coaching and financial support used multiple times. This starts with a stakeholder recommendation. So this usually comes from either a teacher request needing to support the existing curriculum or from site administration. It then comes to our instructional coaches to vet for alignment to standards and curriculum. We then look at the data governance agreement and make sure that our district technology is in alignment and able to support that request. Then we have an approval in teaching and learning, and we provide the professional development to go along with that. To give you an example of what a supplemental material process would look like, I'm going to introduce Karen Brown, our Director of Gifted.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to share with you this evening. The supplemental materials selected by the Gifted Department are chosen to increase the fidelity of the program and enhance the learning opportunities for our gifted and advanced learners. One of the supplemental materials selected is the Junior Great Books program. It is an internationally recognized text option for advanced learners. The stakeholder group included gifted specialists, teachers from the Comprehensive Gifted program, and administrators. 2 essential elements in the vetting process involve looking at the text to ensure that they were age and developmentally appropriate, and that they offered the high level of complexity needed to challenge the advanced learner. Junior Great Books both met and exceeded these criteria. Teachers are trained in the use of these materials on an ongoing basis. And now I'll pass the program back to Mrs. Cheryl Widner.
Cheryl, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'll try again. It is our goal to continue to provide support for our students and teachers by implementing current and updated materials and books. It is we would like to ask you for your consideration as we're asking for approval of the lists that are provided.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Guerin, and your entire team for your PowerPoint and presentation and for the information that you provided us earlier with the lists of the books that are being recommended to be approved. Also, I would like to just give a thank you for all the work in the last, I guess, year and a half since this process started. It sounds like it's been a positive one. And I know the community is very pleased that there is a standardized process to follow. So thank you very much for that. Are there any questions? And I have, let me make sure timing, yes. Board Member Greenberg.
So 2 questions just to clarify. First, there were no books or anything removed from the list approved last year, correct?
Correct.
And there were no books rejected that were recommended by teachers this year, correct?
I'm going to say correct. I'll confirm that. I don't see you. Do you hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, we can hear you.
So, yeah, all books were rejected. I mean, no books were rejected. Any book that made a proposal, the teacher proposal made, those books were accepted after going through the process, and no books were taken off any list.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, I'll move on to approval. Do I have a motion? Oh, there is. Oh, there we go.
Not sure if you're seeing my little post, but
okay, there. I'm so glad you spoke up.
Just a quick one, and I'm not sure who exactly would answer it. And I just thought it'd be a good idea to talk a little about. It might be in the materials, and I apologize if it is clear, but I thought it might be helpful to talk tonight publicly about the process, or at least the conversations that our educators have around students who, maybe they are able to read books well beyond their age or their year that they're in class, but yet the content is not appropriate for those younger students who have a great skill at reading. And how do you go about filtering for those students the materials?
So I'm going to ask Karen Brown to start this conversation, if that's okay. Karen, you're muted. Thank you.
I'm unmuted now. So this is an issue with gifted and advanced learners, as we well recognize. Oftentimes we have learners who are reading 4, 5, sometimes 6 grade levels above their actual grade. We would not want that 4th grader reading a high school text. It is not appropriate. The content is not appropriate. And this is one of the reasons why we choose materials that were specifically designed with these advanced learners in mind, such as the William and Mary curriculum, the junior grade books curriculum. These offer us the ability to provide the level of challenge for the learner, the level of complexity and depth, while still maintaining age and developmental appropriateness for our learners. So it is very much at the forefront of our thinking as we move forward with these learners. We do want to ensure that they are not reading material that is inappropriate for their age and development.
Thank you. I appreciate that conversation and all the work you've done here. It's wonderful.
Any other questions? And I will stare at my chat to see so I don't miss it in case another board member would like a comment or question. Okay, all right. Well, then we will move on do I have a motion to approve action item C as presented?
So moved.
Board member Kravitz moves. Do I have a second?
Second, Barbara.
Thank you. Board member Perlberg seconds. We'll have an individual vote starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz.
Aye.
Barbara Perlberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
And Ellison Beckham. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. We'll move on to action item D, approval of supplemental materials for list of all content areas for 2020-2021 school year. Dr. Creekard, you asked me to just move on to Dr. Guerin and see if she has any other presentation for that area.
No, we've covered it, so we're seeking your approval.
Okay. Any questions from the board members?
You're muted, Allison.
Wait.
You muted yourself again. There you go.
There we go. Okay, I've got to stop being quick on with my finger, I guess. So did you even hear what I said? Are there, well, you heard Dr. Guerin, correct? So does any other board members have questions for Dr. Guerin regarding the approval of supplemental materials list for all content areas? Okay, do I have a motion to approve action item D as presented?
So moved.
Board member Kravitz moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Beckman seconds. We'll have an individual vote, starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz.
Aye.
Barbara Perlberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
And Allison Beckham. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much to your entire team for coming, presenting, and for all the work you do all year long on our supplemental lists.
Thank you.
We'll move on to action item E, authorization of expenditures phase 2, administration building lobby security upgrades, Anasazi and Redfield Elementary Schools. Dr. Creekard, do you have any comments, and would you like to present our presenter?
Yes, thank you. This is again the continuing phase of lobby security in our buildings. Dennis Railer is here to answer any questions, but I'd like to go directly to the board for questions and or a motion as this is a continuing effort at all of our schools.
Okay, do we have any board members who would like to make a comment or have a question? Okay. All right, I would like to go ahead and make a comment. I want to thank Dennis Railer for taking the time several weeks ago when he reviewed the SWORO Initiative Center and he introduced these security improvements. For me, a lot's happened in the past 2 months and there are a lot of uncertainties. And I am in support of updating the lobbies of our schools to ensure safety for our students and our employees. And I'm not questioning the cost to complete these projects as designed, or that the new buildings wouldn't be modern and functional. However, I personally am uncomfortable with spending the additional $690,000 on 2 school lobbies with a total cost of over $1 million without additional information on a current priority list for bond funding. And I did not ask for that earlier. So what I am going to abstain from this vote and just request so that I can have that information, so that I can have a better feeling of what those priorities are given the additional costs for these 2 particular buildings. So any other comments, discussion? Otherwise, we'll just move to a vote. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve action item E as presented?
So moved.
Board member Greenberg moves. Do I have a second?
Oh, second.
Board member Perlberg seconds. We'll have an individual vote, starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz.
Aye.
Barbara Perlberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
And Allison Beckham abstains. Motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention. Thank you very much, Dennis, for all the work you've done on this. Action item F, approval of one-to-one math devices, phase 2. Dr. Creekard, would you like to introduce our presenter?
Well, once again, thank you, President Beckham, members of the board. Once again, this is phase 2 of the one-to-one math approval of devices as we presented at the last meeting, phase 1. This is going forward with that initiative, and it's just the second phase. So I would ask Debbie Spalding is here to answer any questions, or you may go to a motion. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any board members have any questions or comments? I'm looking at our chat line. I don't want to go too fast. Okay, we'll move on. Do I have a motion to approve action item F as presented?
So moved.
Vice President Beckman moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. We'll have an individual vote starting with Jan Michael Greenberg,
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz,
Aye.
Barbara Perlberg,
Aye.
Patty Beckman,
Aye.
and Allison Beckham. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Spalding, and your team for the work that you have done putting together the one-to-one devices for the district. We'll move on to action item G, approval for SUSD Governing Board to submit its proposed priorities for ASBA 2021 political agenda. We talked about this last board meeting, and we asked that each board member send into Sandra Como their priorities. We received those priorities, and thank you very much, Ms. Spalding. She has put up a list of the board members' priorities, if you'll go down to the second part there, for the ASBA's 2021 political agenda. The first part showed what, and I believe did the board members receive this? Did all board members receive it, or do you need to look at it right now?
It was in board book.
It was
Yeah,
in
it
board
was.
book.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. And so the first part is that it was submitted to ASBA last year for 2020, and it was mentioned that we could just approve that we agree to those two items also. So I need some discussion to find out where the board members are, and then we can make a motion.
I was curious as to whether there were any that multiple board members submitted that were the same, several board members submitted the same priority.
Sandra's not here today.
Oh, she's not. Oh, sorry. I was kind of looking for a tally to see, if there was any that were similar.
Originally, when the first two board members submitted, there was only one that was the same. But I believe it was maybe it was improved outcomes. I don't know how Sandra whether they put this down in that order, but there was only one that was different, and I don't know that changed when the last one came in. So that's why we also included last year's for your point of reference. It's a laundry list, and there wasn't immediate consensus on one or two items previously.
That was my understanding also.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Board Member Kravitz.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, just to that, I'll say I'm just looking through the list again. There are a few that look like there's a couple full day kindergarten, it looks like, or two or three of those. I don't know if, so it looks like there are maybe a couple that there are multiple, or at least in the same general vein. But they look like they're also the same ones that we submitted last year. In other words, like they're like revising the school finance formula is one of the ones that we submitted last year of the two. And then it looks like we have a lot in here about just funding generally, restoring funding, or maintaining it. And I don't know if we want to change revising the school finance formula to maintaining funding. I mean, I'm just kind of thinking proactively, given that we're probably going to be taking a ding as a result of the economic recession at the moment. I don't know if I'm sure everyone is going to be saying that at least at a minimum, maintaining what we get would be beneficial, but I don't know.
Do you want to make a motion and put a few things out there and see if it sticks?
Yeah, is that how this has to be done, or
it's really just, since there was no consensus, we could we can start with that, and if it doesn't pass, we can then just go to making a motion to approving what we did last year and seeing if that passes. But it is kind of just putting it out there. Oh, we have a comment by Sandy Kravitz.
I would like to add, increase the compulsory attendance until fulfilling the requirements of a high school diploma or GED, because it really doesn't require additional funding from the legislature. Yes, if you have more students, we get more funding, but we know that a high school diploma is a minimum requirement for success in the working world, and it impacts earning potential throughout one's lifetime. So I think that one, we are less at the mercy of whomever is in our state legislature. I'm hopeful that that is something that, you know, our legislators could all agree on, that a high school diploma is a minimal standard for all of our students.
Any comments on that?
I think that's a good idea.
I support it also.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Any others on there that somebody feels strongly about?
Another one that we may want to consider, although this does have a funding component, is fully restoring 9th grade CTE, CTED eligibility and funding to allow students to explore career fields and or certification for completion. We know that we don't have enough students attending technical schools, and we are going to, we're going to be in bad shape if we don't have enough people who are plumbers, HVAC specialists, etc. And our CTED or JTED programs or CTE programs are one way that we can have students in the pipeline. And we also know that college isn't for everybody. So this is another one that I feel strongly about.
And I would agree with that, especially because we have the infrastructure in place. So it's not like you're implementing something brand new.
And I don't know, I don't want to talk out of turn. I don't know that that requires much more funding. I mean, we get a certain amount of money per student anyway. So if some of it is going to JTED program, I don't know how much more funding that is. Perhaps one of our administrators can comment on that, but again, that's another one that I think if we can have more tradespeople in the pipeline, that benefits all of us.
Other comments from board members?
I can agree with that priority.
Yes, as can I.
I can too. I mean, there's merit to be found in a lot of these, but from a priority perspective, yes, I agree.
It's often, perhaps Dr. Creekard can comment on this, because I know the 9th grade CTE thing has been a pretty recent discussion, at least at one of our high schools. Is it in any way in its current form a timing thing? I mean, rather than, I mean, is there, or maybe someone else can comment, is it that certain CTEs require 4 years to go through, or is doing it in 10th, 11th, 12th grade, is it just about timing that some ninth grade students would prefer to do it their freshman year as opposed to their, junior or senior years? Is there, I mean, what is at stake there?
I think really what we would be looking at is creating more interest and preparation programs in 9th grade, so that kids in their later high school years complete programs, have a better idea what they're going into. When CTE started from the old industrial arts classes and places like EVIT were started, it was juniors and seniors only. And so a kid would take, take one class their junior year and like that, that's great, but now I'm going to try another class. Well, federally, what they try to fund, more funding goes to people who complete the 2-year cycle. And so I think going to freshmen would be giving them a chance to explore a couple of different options and then still complete their certification or the whole cycle there. So it's just trying to, I think it's also, to me, another advantage is it's another hook to keep kids in school and to keep them engaged because they have chosen this area and it is hands-on and it is problem solving and they see some relevance to it. And the more we can do that, the better.
Well said. I agree.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you. I really appreciate that explanation.
All right. Does anybody, would anybody like to make a motion or add something else?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move, I think the discussion was to keep the 2 that we submitted last year, so I move that we submit to the ASBA for our priorities for the political agenda, revising the school finance formula, fully funding kindergarten, adding, increase the compulsory attendance until fulfilling the requirements of a high school diploma or GED, and fully restoring 9th grade CTE/CTED eligibility and funding to allow students to explore career fields and/or certification for completion.
Thank you, Board Member Kravitz, for that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Vice President Beckman seconds. We'll have an individual vote, starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz.
Aye.
Barbara Perlberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
And Allison Beckham. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Action item H, selection of a delegate and alternate to the Arizona School Board Association ASBA Delegate Assembly. Each year, a board member is chosen to be the ASBA delegate and alternate to represent the district at the annual meeting in September and to attend conferences and meetings. Ms. Kravitz held this position this past year, and I was the alternate. Are there any volunteers for this upcoming academic year?
I would like to nominate Board Member Greenberg to be our delegate for the 2020-21 to the Arizona School Boards Association.
Board Member Greenberg, would you accept that? And if you would, then we can vote on it.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate that nomination, and I would be happy to take up that role and responsibility and hopefully represent our district. Obviously, it's a bit strange since they're really only, as far as I'm aware, I don't know if any of my colleagues are running for re-election, but there are only kind of 2 of us that are going to be here for the full next academic year. So,
which I will ask if there is a nomination for an alternate, possibly. Or I could just make it and say I would like to nominate Vice President Patty Beckman as the alternate, if she would graciously accept.
Okay, yes, I will accept.
All right. I move to appoint Board Member Greenberg as the SUSD as the delegate and Vice President Beckman as the alternate delegate. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. We'll have an individual vote, starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz. Sandy? I don't know, Sandy, if you're unmuted.
Aye. I have to, sorry, Allison, I was having
That's
to
okay.
the microphone. You were.
Barbara Perlberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
And Allison Beckham. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much for volunteering. It is actually a wonderful experience. We'll move on to future items for consideration. Board members may propose topics for future agenda items. board members, if you want to, if you'd like to comment on the page, Patty Beckman, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would like to propose that we review the process for the general counsel's evaluation.
Okay, thank you. Any others?
Could
Board Member Greenberg?
is that the general? Does that include, in your mind, the reporting structure? Who the
Yes.
general counsel? Okay,
Yes.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I support that discussion as well.
Okay, I'll put that down too. As well as I do also. Any others? Okay, well, I think we have some others on the agenda. We have an ongoing list, so we will add this to it. I won't be redundant and add on to it the ones that are already on there. We have dates for upcoming meetings. So they are Tuesday, June 9th, 2020 at 4 p.m., a special meeting and executive session. And that will be the superintendent's evaluation. We have Tuesday, June 9th, 2020 at 5 p.m., the special governing board meeting. Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020 at 5 p.m., the regular governing board meeting, which will be our last meeting of this academic school year. And we will also, at that meeting, have a public hearing on the adoption of the expenditure budget for fiscal year 2020-2021. Next, we have governing board reports. Any members have a request for a board report? Sandy Kravitz.
Oh, okay, hold on. I just wanted to, it's not really a report, it's just I wanted to express my thanks to the students, teachers, parents, district administrators, and staff during this challenging fourth quarter. And I wanted to express my gratitude to everyone for stepping up to the challenge to serve our students and get us through this fourth quarter during this unusual time. So thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Just agree with that.
Yep, I think we all do.
Okay. I'd like to also, I believe some of us will be attending some drive-by graduations maybe tomorrow for middle school, or have already for some of our other schools. And then all 5 high schools have put together virtual graduations that will be live, that can be watched by family and friends on Thursday night, the 21st of May. And I want to thank the principals, the assistant principals, the technical teams that help, and the parents that all help to put together these virtual graduations for our students, that hopefully they will feel the appreciation, the gratitude, the congratulations for their accomplishments over the past 12 months or 12 years, as well as their senior year. With that, we can adjourn this meeting. I move to adjourn this regular governing board meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Kravitz, was that Board Member Kravitz?
That was.
All right, seconds. We'll have an individual vote, starting with Jan Michael Greenberg.
Aye.
Sandy Kravitz.
Aye.
Barbara Perlberg.
Aye.
Patty Beckman.
Aye.
And Allison Beckham. Motion passes 5-0. This regular governing board meeting on May 19, 2020 is adjourned at 7:59 p.m. That's my gavel. So thank you, everybody, for another successful virtual meeting.